Okay, well, I'll kick off. So first off, thanks very much for everyone coming. This is the second one we've run. We've got significantly more people this time around, which is really good. Just a bit of housekeeping. The meeting will be recorded and we'll make the recording available after the meetup. Anyone on the last call find it difficult to access the recording? I'll take that as a no then. Okay, so I was going to say a few words about what we've been up to. Then hopefully we'll have a chat with Andrew from EFM, Andrew Swain from EFM, about our recent project. And then Julien's going to talk a little bit about some of the development we've been doing with dynamic optimization, and then see how we go after that. So first of all, welcome. And really this group is for anyone interested in optimization in a sort of broader sense. So we're talking about optimization for transport, manufacturing, workforce management, and you'll see even other applications later on. So it's broadly speaking anything to do with optimization, which is pretty much what we do, obviously. So what we've been up to over the past couple of months, we've just been working on a project with Cameron's and Chemist Warehouse, and Lance Keelos here from Cameron's, although he's not going to talk about that today, looking at issues around efficiency and fleet sizing, and the sort of typical, like we call strategic optimization, where we look back over, say, a period of time, or we look at a forecast in the future and look at questions around how many drivers do we need, how many trucks do we need, how big do they need to be. So it's a project, a sort of project we've done with people like Lynn Fox before, and Schneider Energy, and obviously we'll talk about EFM as well. We've also been doing some rather interesting work around Ambulance Victoria, which has been in the news recently. Obviously there are some issues around capacity, and they've been expanding their fleet of vehicles and also their number of paramedics, and we've been working with them to look at how many ambulances they really need and where they need to put people, and how they can optimize their shift patterns to reduce fatigue. You've probably been reading about the burnout in the nurses, and obviously the health sector's very worried that if people are exposed to too much fatigue, that's not going to be good in the long run. So that's been a very interesting project. In terms of technology, we've been working with a number of customers around the sort of age-old problem of what do I do if I'm running my business using spreadsheets, and we're looking at options to be able to back those spreadsheets up, a bit like, I know you have Google Sheets, but that's not really accessible in the way that customers want that. So we're looking at backing up Excel spreadsheets with a persistent, secure database in the cloud. I think that could be of interest to a lot of people who haven't transitioned yet to the sort of transport management or ERP systems. And as Julien's going to talk about our replanning functionality in DTO. And we've also got a couple of other interesting projects around commercialization of university research. So we're working with Monash University on a new product that they've developed to help people design chemical plants more efficiently. And we're also working with, it's called a CRC for reliable, affordable and clean energy, on helping people make better decisions towards net zero. So looking at applications for optimization technology to back up some of these complicated decisions about where do I get my energy from and what do I use for energy in the future. So it's all very interesting stuff, but at the end of the day, we're trying to work with more people to get our technology out there. And a couple of other things before I hand over to or start with Andrew is we've getting some traction in the UK. Obviously, a challenge with the UK has been COVID and everything else, but we're now getting some traction, and we're talking to a couple of large customers, one in the retail sector and one in the car movements optimization, basically. So that, if there's any questions on that, I'm quite happy to take them, or we can move on to have a chat with Andrew. Okay, so welcome, Andrew. I did see that you joined, Andrew Swain.
Hi, Alan. How are you going?
Yeah, good, thanks. I've got a few questions, and hopefully not too controversial, but I think the audience might be very interested in what we've been doing to you. So, would you maybe start off, tell us a little bit about EFM and what you're doing and where you're trying to take the company?
Yeah, certainly. So, EFM warehousing and distribution belongs to a much larger group. So, sort of starts at a corporate level, which is a company by the name of FMH Group, which is one of the significant shareholders is Singapore Post, which invested in the business last year. And there's three businesses that sit underneath FMH. One is EFM 4PL, which is asset light logistics services business. Another is a company by the name of Flip Group, which is develops logistics technology for the market, but also the businesses within the group. And then Logistics Holdings Australia, which is the business that EFM Warehouse and Distribution belongs to, and that's where a number of transport companies, physical asset companies live, and also the warehousing as well. So the warehousing business, which I work for, has experienced significant growth, certainly over the last 18 to 24 months, and has seen the footprint expand, has seen the number of and the quality of the sheds that we're now putting our customers in expand, but also has us looking at, I suppose, different channels of revenue and different customers that we're looking to attract to our customer base as well, which was kind of the introduction to Opturion that we came to.
I was reading, actually. I was very interested in the Singapore Post involvement, because I understand it's Couriers Please part of the group too, or is that another part of Singapore Post?
Yeah, Couriers Please is a 100% owned entity of Singapore Post, but that sits separate to the FMH Group.
All right, because we had some dealings with them before. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's also the name escapes me, but also another large 3PL and freight forwarder that deals mostly in sort of online fulfillment, that also belongs to the Singapore Group, Singapore Post Group as well, within Australia.
Okay. That's good. So, well, maybe we'll get an introduction to Singapore Post at some stage.
a few layers removed from me, Alan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, okay, well, I'm conscious of the fact that there are some transport professionals in this group, but I'm also conscious of the fact there aren't. So, would you be able to give us a sort of an overview of the problem that you were looking to solve when you came to us?
Yeah, certainly. So I think one of the opportunities that we saw within our 3PL business was obviously we've seen significant growth within our footprint and our customer base, revenue. I think certainly in the last 12 to 18 months we've more than doubled the business. But we saw an opportunity to provide, I suppose, a distribution service for the customers, whereby customers within the warehouse, we would either pull inventory into the warehouse, from either their suppliers, contract manufacturers, etc., and then we can push their products out of the warehouse and do the final mile delivery into the end receiver. It's a service that we're offering sporadically at this point throughout the group, but we certainly saw an opportunity to build out the service offering and make it something that would be a significant channel for us in the future. Our plans were always to look to get that operational kind of from March this year onwards. But I suppose an opportunity crossed our desk late last year, which forced us, as some of these things happen, forced us to have a look at it a little bit earlier. So we, at that point in time, an opportunity crossed our desk, which was a significant tender for a significant number of vehicles nationwide, and we had pockets of capability within our business across a number of areas. Operationally, understanding that we've got a lot of transport businesses within our business, we kind of have that covered. There's a significant compliance team within our wider group, both at a corporate level but also a local level within LHA. So that was something we were relatively comfortable with as well. And certain aspects of putting together a significant tender response, we were pretty comfortable with. But probably one of the gaps that we had was putting together and doing the modelling for a distribution offering of a significant amount of subcontractors nationwide, and submitting a conforming tender response that had us submitting really at a cost per carton level and a cost per drop level. So as you can imagine, if we have a stab at that and we get it wrong, we would have win the tender then, and we hadn't lined up our numbers correctly, then there's significant risk with that. So we approached the market, and the IT partner actually who we'll be working with for the actual execution of the deliveries suggested a handful of providers in the same space that Opturion work through, and we kind of went through the selection process, and we landed with Alan and Leslie and the team.
Okay, just out of interest, I don't know if you're seeing this, but we've had a number of conversations with what I would call principals, people who actually have the transport problem, and they've mentioned to us that they would ideally like a bidder to be able to demonstrate that their bid is, if you like, reasonable, because what they don't want is for someone to come back halfway through or in the first year and say, well, actually we got it wrong, because once then you're not locked in, but you've sort of got so far in that it's difficult to sort of come back out again. So I don't know, in this particular tender, were they interested in actual numbers or?
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of the response, there was operational components where we actually had to talk through the logic of how we arrived at the numbers. So that was critical, and by nature, our group, which kind of flows down across all of the groups within the business, I suppose when we decide to submit a tender response, we don't do it half-baked. So from our point of view, it was a really important component of the actual response, which was to actually talk through the profiling that we've done, an idea of what the runs look like. We really went into detail around the time taken per run, the cost per run, at a really detailed level from each of the sites. So that was something that Opturion was able to assist us with.
Yeah, because I know that your group is more on the warehouse side, but based on your experience in transport and logistics, what would be the normal approach to a problem like this? Would you say that this is normal practice, or is it still perhaps a bit unusual to go to this level of detail?
I mean, I'm not going to talk on behalf of other companies, but certainly when I've worked at transport companies before, and granted many years ago, a lot of the investment really came into functions of the business that were either managing assets or were revenue generating roles, i.e. sales. So whilst there was commercial capability, it wasn't something that was overly invested in. yeah, and certainly when it comes to some of the larger players, and there's a lot of bids that you're responding to per week, per month, per year. Sometimes it can be really hard to show that level of detail and attention and focus to every single individual one. So yeah, personally from my experience, sometimes there will be, you obviously need to submit the conforming rating structure. You need to submit the conforming template that is provided, and generally it will kind of stop there. So to kind of go past that, which we aim to do each time is certainly something that is something we strive for, and generally based on feedback sets us apart from the competition.
Yeah, I can understand that. Okay, so one of the questions was, you mentioned that there was a selection exercise. Is there any obvious reasons why you came to, or anything you would share you came to us rather than anyone else? Bearing in mind the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your team's credit, Alan, I think you were quite responsive to our needs. I think, I'm not sure what roles people do within within their various businesses, but from working.
Hey guys, sorry, I'm just in the middle of a warehouse. I'm going to drop off. But if you have any questions or anything like that, just reach out to me.
Yeah, obviously working a number of commercial and sales roles, sometimes you get things dropped on your plate with very short timeframes. So I think at the very beginning, we were quite clear that we needed to move at pace, and you guys were really quick in understanding the scope and providing a scope of works and a price within a quick time frame, which is what we needed and what we communicated up front. Whereas other parties, there was just a lot of deliberating that still needed to take place, which we just couldn't afford. And then there were the actual data set for the tender was not perfect. Needed a lot of I can see Leslie nodding feverishly.
Yeah,
it required a lot of manipulation. There were a lot of assumptions, and obviously, there was a lot of gaps in the data. So I think there were a couple of parties that were turning up their nose to the data set, and also kind of wanted to do a lot more deliberation. Whereas Leslie was quite clear on what assumptions he would do and had a plan. So it was really easy for us to engage and execute on that plan.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It is a challenge, because our approach very much is, if you keep asking the client for more information, they just basically give up and say, you're making my life hard. But if we run something through with some reasonable assumptions, they can then look at the solution and say, actually, there is something wrong with the data, and then they're more engaged. Because if it doesn't really make much difference to the end result, who cares? If you're talking about travel time or something, it's not important. So that's an important point, yeah.
Andrew, Lance Keeler from Cameron's here. It's got a quick question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
This particular study that you undertook with Opturion, this is an existing operation now that you're currently managing?
No, it was a tender scenario.
Okay.
Lance.
So
yeah.
The question was along the lines of, was more so trying to understand as to whether actual reflects theoretical in the outcomes, because obviously route optimization studies can be quite blue sky in nature, not always reflective of actual, which is as you no doubt know, and others on the call that are in transport, where you got your key underlying assumptions wrong, and which you cost upon. If it doesn't reflect actual, it turns out to be trouble. So I was just wondering as to whether there was a comparison.
Definitely, that's a good point, and something that we were, to be quite honest, petrified about. So we ran a couple of scenarios with Leslie and the team around the most optimized scenario that was put forward, and then we looked to overlay that, I suppose, with probably some operational conservatism as well. And then we obviously when we put together the tender response, we probably landed somewhere in the middle. And then we were fortunate enough to the actual tender scenario and the competitive scenario is still going. So they haven't landed on an outcome, but as part of the selection process, we got an opportunity to present to the executive team, and we presented our findings and the fleet and the makeup and how we arrived at those numbers, and they validated that the numbers that we put forward aligned with what they were currently receiving, and where there was, I suppose, optimization, where there was a reduction in vehicles at certain sites, that it made sense, our logic.
Always comforting to have that kind of a engagement with the customer to be able to validate your numbers, where a lot of the time they typically say, well, that's your call, you're the logistics expert, you tell us how to do it. So that's a bit of a luxury that's not always afforded to us, I think. But thanks for that. Cheers.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining the discussion, lads, because I was going to say to Andrew, one of the things we did in this particular case is we got some numbers from the customer in terms of current fleet size, and then sort of baselined it. Say, okay, can we replicate what they're doing with the vehicles that they think they've got? And that means we can then move forward with confidence. But you're right, you don't always get that sort of information.
You're right. And look, the landscape's changed in our industry, certainly from a BD and tendering perspective, that found that customers are probably less likely to share existing information or existing baseline fleet sizes and fleet counts, because they're looking for optimization, ways of doing it better. So that's why it's necessary to sort of conduct a theoretical optimization study to see how we might be able to drive waste, so they can compare and count their savings. But in that inability to sort of get full understanding of the task, you can really set yourself up for failure if you don't know all the detail or all the idiosyncrasies of a particular task, because you might not be allowing for it. And a lot of large international businesses these days that outsource most of their transport activity or warehousing activity probably don't have the visibility of what their operator to a level that they probably need to, especially when conducting a market engagement, because they're really misleading the market. And we've seen it happen many times where you quote on a perfect world scenario, but turns out to be turns out to be a totally different picture, and can lead to all sorts of commercial discussions and challenges and dispute, basically.
Yeah. So
that's just my little look at the world at the moment.
Obviously, yeah, it's one of the issues that I think principals are concerned about this too, because they don't want necessarily accidental lowball bids that cause a lot of issues in the future, I guess. So I mean, we do everything we can to, if you like, move away from a theoretical in terms of the travel times and service times and loading times and all those sorts of other things we put in, because I know sometimes service times can be a big issue. Everyone obsesses about travel times, but oftentimes it's service times and loading times that become the issue. So, I mean, Leslie, do you want to say anything about what you thought about the process and give in the conversation?
Yeah. So, and just to continue on from Lance's comment. So, in particular, service times, so load and unload times. So in this bid packaging, I think there's issues with the information in all bid packages you come across, but that sort of lack of detail on what to expect in terms of loading and unloading is a huge factor. So that's something we and working with Andrew on that, we did some initial modeling with the assumptions we had, and brought that back to Andrew. And I think you'll remember there was quite a mismatch in terms of, at least in terms of the fleet sizes we proposed versus what they were saying they were doing. And then we started looking more in detail at those sort of aspects. Of did we model the loading and unloading correctly, or in particular the unloading? And it was, I think it was a challenge both for us and for EFM to get some numbers out and some assumptions that were consistently across each of the sites we were considering. So I've got a few questions myself for Andrew as well. So just continuing from that, so modeling is a quite iterative process, and you often produce results and then create more questions. Was that something you've dealt with before when using potentially external companies to do consultancy, and was that in line with what you expected and how you otherwise work?
So just help me understand the sort of the question, Leslie. So you're just asking.
So so when we do some modeling, we produce some results, and those results often lead to further questions as to well, are these assumptions correct, or is this the sort of are those results in line with what we need for answering the bid package questions? So I know we did an initial model, and I think the initial results were not necessarily what you could use directly. Was that expected on your end that might happen?
Yeah, I think yes, it was expected, and I think that that initial scoping piece, and getting someone, whether it be internal or external to your business, to who knows what they're looking at, to get really deep into the data and understand. I suppose a desktop review from a data review perspective is critical, because obviously that then is an excuse, for want of a better term, to re-engage with the customer and give them your observations in terms of what you've seen within the data. It hopefully sparks a discussion around understanding the operation in better detail, so you have an opportunity to link that to the data, because in isolation the data is will probably drive a different outcome unless you understand what how you can link it to what's actually going to happen operationally. It's critical to make sure that initial review happens, and those questions and those assumptions, and what's not quite making sense is flagged, so that you can re-engage the customer and get what you want, so that when ultimately you start with an assumption list of here, by the time you submit, you've hopefully got it to the point where there's only a handful of assumptions rather than 3 pages.
Yeah. So my other question was around so the modeling we do can produce very fine-grained details. So basically do run sheets. We produce a number of KPIs. You find it easy to extract what you needed from that data, and how was the process for you in terms of us helping you get the right bits of information out?
Yeah, I think ultimately I think we collaborated pretty well in that process. I think the initial models were able to give us what we needed to submit the tender response, but probably didn't have some of the information that we required that could help us do our internal profitability and cost analysis work. So we sort of provided a template or a cost template from our point of view that we were using internally to price the opportunity, but also link it to the overheads that we're going to be required to manage the scope of works. And so then when we provided you that template, we were able to get all of the information we needed in that conforming template. So it was it hit the mark from our point of view.
All right. Conscious of time as well. So recently you've come back to Opturion for some further modeling. Was that a straightforward decision to make? And was that something where you didn't necessarily go through the same process of finding a provider as before?
Yeah, definitely. Slightly different. I mean, this is a contract that we've already won and have access to the data, and we'll hopefully remove a lot of the barriers that we bumped into collectively. But yeah, when it sort of came to how we would finalise that modelling piece, it was an easy decision from our point of view.
All right. Alan, I don't know if you wanted to ask any more.
I think you've given a perfect answer to that question, Andrew. Well, look, thank you very, very much for doing this. Very much appreciated. I've had a couple of messages already in the chat that people find this very interesting. So, again, thanks for agreeing to be subject to this interview and share your learning with other optimization professionals and transport professionals. And we look forward to working with you again in this sort of project or in others.
Yeah, likewise. And if anyone wants to pick up, have a chat offline or independent, happy to have a chat and unpack it in more detail. But yeah, thanks to you and your team, Alan. My pleasure.
Yeah, I think we could organise that because we obviously know who's on here. So I would say if anyone's got any questions, we're quite happy to link you through, do an introduction to Andrew, and follow up the conversation. Thanks very much for that offer, Andrew. That's great. Okay, next item on the agenda. We're not too bad for time, to be quite honest. Julien is going to speak about what we've been doing recently with Dynamic Transport Optimizer and Replanning. So do you want to grab the screen, Julien?
I might unmute myself as well, otherwise I won't be speaking about anything. Yeah. Okay, let me just share my screen here. I need to do that one, I think.
And again, just to check, Julien, are you happy for people to ask questions as we go?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, yeah, well, feel free to
just jump in
as we're going.
Okay, can you all see my screen there?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep, excellent.
Yep.
Okay, so thanks for that, Alan. So today I'm just going to talk fairly briefly about the dynamic optimization capabilities we've been building into our transport optimizer. As an introduction, by way of an introduction for those who aren't familiar with this, our transport optimizer is called DTO, stands for Dynamic Transport Optimizer. And this is a system, or really a suite of systems that automatically create transport plans. So you feed it a set of orders and a fleet with which to fulfill those orders, and it will generate you a set of run sheets, assigning each of those orders to a vehicle for delivery. And we're really focused on three things when we're generating those plans. So compliance, so with various business rules and regulations. So a big part of this system is fatigue management for drivers, so inserting driver breaks in such a way that they conform with the various regulations concerning fatigue management. Customer service, so we're concerned with delivering orders on time within the specified time windows. And another big one is cost reduction. So in addition to reducing monetary costs, We're also interested in reducing the hours worked, the distance travelled by the vehicles, and indeed the fleet usage. This happens at 3 levels, or we like to think of it happening at 3 levels. So for those of you who've seen that on the slide before, he has this big slide with a sort of pyramid. So we think of it as sort of at a strategic level, an operational level, or at a tactical level. And really the tactical level we'll be talking about today. So at a strategic level, we might be doing an optimization for transport operations over a period of a week or a month or thereabouts. At the operational level, we're talking more about the day-to-day level, and tactical we'll come on to in a minute. So the standard use case of this for these transport optimizers is to plan from scratch ahead of time. So typically, you would plan for the coming day, the evening before. So before we progress, I have here, this is an example of a plan the optimizer might produce for one vehicle here, and it's been displayed on the map. And you can see in this little text box here the sort of information you will get. So you can see at what time the vehicle's been scheduled to start, at what time it's been scheduled to pick up orders. And this second text box here is a delivery, and you can see that the delivery has been scheduled at a particular time. This location has hours at which it's open, so the delivery has been scheduled within those hours. So having a plan ahead of time is great, but then there's lots of things that can happen on the day which can disrupt that plan. So as an example, and the kind of things you might encounter, a driver might be sick. We may have more orders than we originally planned for. The orders may actually have different quantities or sizes to what we were planning for. Pickup and delivery locations can change. Pickup and delivery times can change. We may have delays caused by adverse traffic conditions, that kind of thing. So what we really need there is what we're calling tactical or on-the-fly planning, which leads me to, so DTO, or the Transport Optimizer, provides sort of 3 tactical planning capabilities. And these are what we call replanning, dispatch recommendation, and reoptimization. And I'm now just going to briefly describe what we mean by each of those and give you some small examples. So the first is replanning. And this is the sort of situation when we need to modify an existing plan ahead of time. And the sort of key idea here is we want to adapt to a new situation while minimizing disruption. And we've had a number of clients who have this sort of problem. So for example, with Schneider Electric, they had an issue that they wanted to know in advance roughly how many vehicles they were going to require. So that's from the perspective of driver management, it's useful to know that, so you can organize, on the day how many drivers you need. And the other issue they had was while they were doing the pick in their warehouse, they'd often start the pick without having sort of the full picture. And as the pick progressed, that picture would emerge. So in terms of the sizes of the things they were transporting, for example, that wasn't necessarily certain at the point they started their pick. Chemist Warehouse is another customer who's had this sort of problem, and their issue is they do their planning the night before, but what happens is those plans will be revised as the evening progresses. So the incoming orders are arranged in what they call waves or phases, and this kind of thing can have an impact on warehouse operations. So if you imagine the situation where you're performing the pick in the warehouse and you're lining up orders at loading bays, if the orders change, you don't necessarily want to be carting stuff from loading bay 20 over to loading bay 1. So minimizing disruption is important in this case. So the optimizer has the capability to essentially take an existing plan, take some changes to that plan, and produce a new plan that will minimize the disruption. And you can configure it. So for example, it would often be the case that maneuvering bulky items around the warehouse is difficult. So you can configure the optimizer to say, okay, leave the bulky items where they are, all other things being equal, and rearrange the transport plan around that. Okay, the second of these dynamic optimization approach it, or dynamic optimization capability, sorry, is what we call dispatch or dispatch recommendation. And this is where we have the problem that on the day there are new orders coming in. So this is appropriate to sort of point-to-point style operations. So for example, couriers, one application that's with Allied Express, which is taxi trucks, or patient transport, which we've had with the flying doctors. So both of those operations, there's a dispatch center, which new orders are being phoned into. And the dispatchers have a problem. They're typically on the phone to a client, and they need to know, okay, given that there's this new order or this new piece of work coming in, what can I do with it? Which vehicle can I assign that order to? And often they'll need to provide the end customer some sort of indication of when the goods or the patient, as it may be, will be delivered. When we've gone into these kind of organizations, what we've seen is there's a lot of looking up stuff on Google Maps, which is somewhat unfortunate. A lot of that process can be automated, and there's a case study for Allied Express on our webpage, for example, which talks about how this is done. So what you can do with these dispatch recommendations, and I should have mentioned this. So when you ask the system to generate a recommendation, it can potentially generate multiple recommendations, which may have different trade-offs. So you can generate a recommendation which will be most on time, so closest to the delivery window, required delivery window, one which is cheapest. A big focus for Allied Express was balancing out driver earnings, so that a consideration for them was making sure that drivers were earning at a sufficient level. So the focus here is really on improving the dispatchers' customer service and not having them spend time running through the mechanics, looking up stuff in Google Maps. Actually, there's a picture of that. So just to give you a flavor of what that looks like. Definitely not so easy. There's a new job here, which has to be picked up here in Canterbury and delivered down here. So we're up in Sydney here. And we've generated some recommendations, and these recommendations are ranked in terms of some ranking scheme, which is considering on-time performance, cost, and driver earning. And we can see an existing driver here, and the operator can just sort of scroll through this and decide, or make an informed choice as to who the most appropriate who the most appropriate vehicle to assign that order to is. The third of our capabilities is what we call reoptimization. So this is where we're performing on-the-fly replanning across an entire fleet. You potentially want to do this for a number of reasons. There being new orders, or particularly if there are delays, you may want to be shifting orders that are sitting in the warehouse, or in the case of patient transport, waiting at a hospital, to another vehicle which can be more on time. So again, we've had a number of clients who require this capability. We've done some work with Mainfreight where there was a fair amount of uncertainty around the arrival times of incoming interstate line haul, which was having a kick-on effect to their metropolitan operations. So what we were really looking at, and the question they really had was, when should those, given we're waiting for this freight and we have vehicles, metropolitan delivery vehicles waiting at the warehouse, when should we send them out? So this sort of on-the-fly replanning allows you to answer that kind of question. It's a similar sort of setup for the flying doctors. There's a good deal of uncertainty in that particular application due to requirements to attend patients while they're visiting a hospital or some sort of health centre. So it's not entirely clear when the crews are going to be available. So what can happen in that particular circumstance is, even though you've planned ahead, if the crew is having to wait because there's been a medical condition or a medical event, you need to find alternative crews who can actually handle pending orders on the pending orders for the vehicle that is now waiting. So the last thing I would like to talk about is, actually two more things. So I just want to briefly talk about what organizations would need to, or what the requirements on organizations who would like to implement dynamic optimization are. So for the ahead of time optimization, actually, there aren't too many requirements. For example, our optimization system can in principle just be driven entirely by a spreadsheet. For dynamic optimization, that's not really possible. So at a minimum, you do need some form of GPS feed or some sort of telematic system giving your vehicle locations. The system, the optimization needs to know where the vehicles are. You also ideally need some sort of order status from proof of delivery devices or something, essentially so that the optimization can know, is this thing loaded, is this order loaded on the vehicle at this particular point in time, or has it already been delivered? The other thing which is sometimes overlooked is when you're dynamically replanning, you need some additional business rules or policies. And as an example of what I mean by this, it's quite common if you're, for example, delivering to supermarkets, if you miss your delivery slot, because supermarkets will typically have, many deliveries occurring in a day. If you miss your delivery slot, you're not delivering. So there needs to be policies around, well, okay, if the vehicle was delayed, what is supposed to happen? Now, it may be acceptable in some circumstances, okay, say that delivery can be late. There are other circumstances where if a delivery is late, then it's not being delivered. So I would say in general, what's required for dynamic optimization is there is a higher integration commitment required in order to support that kind of thing. Finally, and related to this, I'd just like to mention a capability we've been improving over the past few months. And this is the ability to simulate dynamic optimization. And the reason you might want to do that is essentially, and it's obviously something which was mentioned before, is what are the benefits of optimization for a business or for your business? So this capability to simulate dynamic optimization allows us to take historical data and actually run a comparison between what actually happened and what should have happened. So that's a capability, as I said, we've improved over the past few months. It's now much more automated, and the sort of feedback loop there is now much smaller. So if that's something you're interested in, you should definitely talk to us. Finally, we have a website set up for DTO, which has a tutorial on DTO, and that covers many of the things I've spoken about today, obviously in a less time-constrained fashion, so in much greater detail. Okay, I think that's all from me. So if there are any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Julien. Do you want to unshare then? Okay, so any questions? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's worth just reiterating that the two basic capabilities around what Julien talked about of simulation is, one is to say, okay, well, what would we do differently if we implemented even just daily tactical planning, which is the day before? And then this other capability is, what would the additional potential be for if we optimize more regularly during the day, or twice a day, or 3 times a day, or whatever, which is what Julien was alluding to there. So I've now got on the agenda, we've done an alert safe video, and we're just interested in some feedback. Are you available for that, Tara?
I am, yeah. Let me just
by way of background, the last session we talked quite a lot about alert safe because we had Brett Hawes from John Holland. This is just something that we put together. It may not be directly relevant to some of our transport clients because there's fairly strict rules on fatigue, but obviously we have clients in engineering and healthcare and other areas where we're continuing to develop the alert safe technology that we got from the alertness CRC. So if you want to roll that, Tara, and then we can probably wrap up. Have we got some audio?
Yes, it should come.
AlertSafe forms a vital part of a cloud-based fatigue risk management system that includes alertness analysis, roster design, roster building, and management. Initially conceptualized for the healthcare industry, AlertSafe was developed in conjunction with Monash University and the Cooperative Research Centre for Alertness, Safety and Productivity. AlertSafe contains both biomathematical fatigue and risk models and can be customized to include a business's rules and requirements. The system models the impact of shift work on each individual staff member during the rostering process. It also supports automatic and manual roster building and uses AI to dynamically redesign rosters as potential fatigue hotspots are identified or as demands and resources change. AlertSafe's multi-device support allows staff to view rosters, set unavailability, manage shifts, and track their hours from their smartphone, laptop, or tablet. The staff portal includes advice and real-time assessment tools to measure and monitor fatigue risk. The admin portal allows administrators to view and manage rosters, approve leave requests, view user comments, and manually build rosters or change shifts. AlertSafe will provide an integral part of your fatigue risk management procedures. It is versatile and can be applied across a variety of industries, including healthcare, emergency services, airlines, and construction. Make sure your organization is fatigue-free and risk-free with Opturion's AlertSafe. To learn more, visit opturion.com/alertsafe.
Okay, thanks, Sahara. So we're not necessarily looking for Oscars, but if there's any comments, we're interested in feedback from the group to see if you think that gives us a good summary of what we've got, or whether it needs a bit more detail, for example. Any takers? Anyone from Opturion got any comments?
Slow down a wee bit.
Sorry, David?
Just need to slow down my voiceover just a tad, I think.
All right. Okay, well, we've kept the time pretty well, actually. So in the final wrap up, we're having another group meeting on the 8th of June at the moment. I know Ian's been talking to a few people about speaking. Did you get any results, Ian, or are we still looking for somebody?
Ian, you're on mute.
I can't hear you, Ian.
Haven't got just at the moment, but confident that we will get an interesting speaker or two.
Yeah, well, I hope you can see that it's not necessarily a high, very demanding process. It's really just a general chat about what we did and why we did what we did. So don't be shy. We're interested in any feedback, any customer in terms of transport or manufacturing or healthcare, workforce management, anything like that. So we're open to suggestions. So if anyone's interested, please let us know. We'll get a recording sent off fairly soon, won't we, Tahara?
We will, yes.
That's right, yeah. And we'll let you know a couple of weeks before the next meetup what the agenda is and any other information. So I'm conscious we've got a few minutes left. Is there any questions or observations from the group about anything we could do either better or additional, or anyone from Opturion got any comments if nobody else does? So I've got a few chats coming through. Well, look, if that's the case, I'm quite happy to call it quits a few minutes before time, and then means everybody can get on to their next appointment. And thank you very much for attending. It's really no point without the audience, so thank you very much for coming. And please, if you think you've got anything that you'd like to share with the rest of the group, we'll make space for it. Anyway, thanks again, and goodbye for now.